So this poem is called The Man Who Spent Years in the Bath. It's a narrative poem, it's a story poem, and it goes on a bit. One day in June, I think it was, a man decided to have a bath. Up to that point, he had shown no particular inclination towards or love of unexpected behaviour. In actual fact, people said he was quite ordinary. However, to himself, he had always wished there was time enough in the day for 2 baths, each of at least an hour's duration, with hot water and warm towels waiting. Usually, he could make time only for a short one in the evening before retiring, although his wife encouraged him to take showers, which saved water and were hot and invigorating and quicker. The beauty of the bath, he would explain quietly, is that it is not quicker or invigorating. Instead, he said, it is slow and patient and laps gently at the underside of the imagination, somewhere between waking and working, somewhere off in brackets from life. His wife usually ignored him and went out to work. So, as I said, one day in June, several years ago now, he ran a bath, stripped off, and stepped in. He has said that this bath was, in origin, no different to any other bath he'd run. But somewhere after the first 10 minutes, he realised that a bridge had been charred. Something inside him had snapped a little, and his mind had been made up. In the bath, he maintained, he was able to think clearer and to write better and understand more. Problems slipped away simply. And for the first time in years, poems bubbled up through the water into his half-closed eyes. Great poems, small poems, free verse, sonnets, limericks, clerihews, imitations, intimations, all lined orderly into his inner eye. He knew he was sitting at the wellspring of some great aquifer of verse, in command of an unbidden body of beauty, and he knew that such a find brought with it duties, and he set himself to recording his oeuvre. But he found his paper simply pulped. His ink dyed the water and stained the enamel. His laptop short-circuited. He dictated to his daughter, but she was uninterested and quickly grew bored with the exercise. His son couldn't write. His wife was too busy to listen for long. He topped the water up, draining a little out, tapping a little in, new water for cold, hot water for old, and he thought more. Repeating his poems to himself, he found them growing better. He found verse spinning off into new poems, into plays, into short stories, lyrical and fragile and laced with wit. He kept fit by swimming lengths. Repeating his work to himself so as to not lose it before he could record it, he found new directions open before him. His mind, drifting somewhere between waking and working, was like a dove in the flood, each time bringing something home in its beak, something that contained a sign and a prayer and a dream and a promise. He got out briefly each day when everyone was away to use the lavatory. Repeating everything over and over in his head, mumbling a little under his breath, splashing a little with one hand or the other, he discovered lost myths and forgotten fables. He coxed for the Argonauts. He played cards with Cervantes. He discovered corners of literature in which he could make a mark, corners that he could whip the cobwebs from to uncover. To uncover what? Well, he never knew until he tugged. And then there it simply was. Addicted to this bath, high on the creativity it inspired in him, he didn't notice how long he'd been there. A month or 2, perhaps, he guessed. But he wasn't concerned, and his wife, who was at heart loving, brought him his tea and would listen to his latest effort, smile, kiss him, and leave to watch EastEnders. His daughter, however, who was at this time a teenager, was less impressed with her father's predilection for submersion. The first month or two it had seemed odd, but novel. After 6 months, she had grown too embarrassed to bring friends home, fearing that they would need to use the lavatory, which, although not actually in the same room as the bath, was in the room next door, and the walls were quite thin, and she didn't want them to hear her dad reciting to himself, splashing happily, scrubbing his back as he tested the sounds and stresses in some new villanelle or tetratis. When the first anniversary of his getting in the bath occurred, his wife made him a cake, his daughter bought him a dictaphone, and his son joined the army. The humidity in the bathroom warped the tape in the dictaphone, but he appreciated the thought. Recently, he discovered talent for composing one-act verse tragedies and could be heard upstairs playing all the parts himself in a variety of voices, interlaced with moans and screams and occasional final sullen death rattle. Soon, though, he slipped into a light-hearted imagist period, which proved much less distracting to those others who shared his house. On his second anniversary, his son came home on leave and brought his new boyfriend with him. The boyfriend happened to be a poet too, and spent much of his weekend's leave perched on the edge of the bath, swapping sonnets and ballads. Other than on his wife's daily visits with his dinner or tea, no one had ever really listened to his poems before, and certainly no one who actually understood the trials of being a neglected and fractured artist. His daughter left to go to university. He stood on tiptoe and waved from the open, frosted window. The calendar rolled on, and the water dipped down and topped up, and the hum of the extractor fan came on earlier in the afternoon, and outside somewhere the leaves were shifting to the ground, and it was a little over 3 years since he had stepped into the bath. He stood up, toweled himself dry, sprinkled talcum powder over his pale, undulated skin, and slipped into a nice pair of cool cotton pyjamas. His wife was surprised to find his lump waiting for her in their bed when she came up after news night. She had heard the gurgling away of the bathwater through the pipes earlier, but had thought nothing of it, absently. She welcomed him back with a kiss and a hug and switched off the light, saying, something smells nice. Yes, dear, he said. It's the talcum powder. The next morning, October the 14th, he went into work and explained why he hadn't been in for a while. When he came home that evening, he sat with his wife at the dinner table. Since both the children had left home, they were alone. It was nice to be a poet, he said. Those were beautiful songs I could hear while I was in the bath, and the stories were full of love and meaning and laughter. I wish I could remember them now. He cried, just a tiny bit. His wife looked at him and smiled. It's good to have you back, she said. Maybe you'd like to share a shower. I have poetry too.
Oh, that's great.